Greetings, hi. Um, so a small problem that I don't think I will be able to resolve tonight. I tried, I tried looking up how to put a PDF into OBS because I tried doing that and it just did not work. It did not work at all. 6 a.m. Gregor time. Yeah, let's go. Um, but sadly I could not figure it out. I tried to put the source on, but it was weird. It was, I don't know. It just showed the first page and maybe part of the UI. So we're not really gonna be having any visuals today. I am very deeply sorry. But you know what? You know what? Doom Project Gutenberg if people want to read along. So I've read through the Project Gutenberg version before. But this one is Anna's Archive. So I don't know if those two are different translations. Yeah. But yeah, I genuinely I do not know how to get it to work. Because come on, OBS. I switched the pages and it stayed on page 1. It's not very cool. It's not very poggers. But you know what is pretty poggers? Is we can still have... Anna's Archive has a whole bunch of them, but the one I was sent was the Bernofsky translation. Okay. What we can have that's pretty cool... Where is it? Hang on, I had a... No, where did it go? Where did it go? Okay. Oh, there we go. Oh, there we go. We can have some visuals. We'll have some great visuals. If we can't have the book, we can have the closest thing we can get to the book. So yeah. It'll be great. I hope that my audio is pretty good, so that way it doesn't like... I don't want it to end up cutting out in the middle of reading, because since we don't have the text on screen, I don't want anyone to like miss out what I'm saying, you know? So I will just get into it. Translation. I'm looking through. Ooh, now we also have other stuff in this. I should probably... There's so much. Preface. Do y'all want me to read like the preface for this, or just like go straight into the book? Because the book itself isn't too long. Wait. Hang on a second. Hang on, wait a second. In the... Oh, yeah, I did have the, Okay. Seri is DMing me. But, yes, Seri, I did have the the PDF file open in the browser tab, and I did stream the browser. Oh! Okay, hang on a second. Hi, Unga Bunga. Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Why did I say hello, everyone? You're the one who should be saying that. Welcome back to Five Nights at Samsa's. Okay, but anyways. So, hi, Oomph is here. For sillies, for reading. Hey! Hang on, for some reason, it does not show you. It did not add you. That is so mean. It's trying to rapture you. It's trying to. There you are. I don't know where to put you. We can go right up here. There we go. Okay. So. Yay! I don't know if should I read the preface? Or should I just... Because, like, again, or, like, just get into the reading. Because it just, you know. I'm just stroking my chin. Yeah. I should have tested this way earlier today, but... It's fine. It's fine. That's that, and this is this. Okay. So. I do want to read the preface, actually. This might be interesting. Preface. Reader's letter to Kafka. Berlin. Charlottenburg? April 10th, 1917. Dear sir, you have made me unhappy. Banger intro. Wait. Amazing. If I received a letter that started with that, I would just pack everything up and go on a shrimping boat, never to return. But... Okay. I bought your Metamorphosis as a gift for my cousin, but she is incapable of understanding the story. My cousin gave it to her mother, who doesn't understand it either. Her mother gave the book to my other cousin, who also didn't find an explanation. Now they have written to me. They expect me to explain the story to them since I am the PhD in the family, but I am at a loss to explain it? How do you... And we're in, like, the age of illiteracy. And I think... Sir, I have spent months in the trenches exchanging blows with the Russians without batting an eyelash, but I could not stand losing my good name with my cousins. Only you can help me. You must do it since you were the one who landed me in this mess, so please tell me what my cousin should think about Metamorphosis. Most respectfully, yours, Dr. Siegfried Wolf. Okay. That is a... Okay. Goodness. something about the fact that he's like, I'm fine with the trenches, but I can't understand this. Something about that is kind of funny to me. I'm gonna be real. Anyways. On the evening of November 17th, 1912, a young employee of the Workmen's Accident Insurance Agency in Prague sat down to work on a troubling little story, that is in quotation marks, troubling little story, that had to occur to him, also in quotation marks, in bed the previous night. In bed. Okay. After spending the first part of the day in the office... We're not gonna be able to finish reading this if we keep laughing. Okay. After spending the first part of the day in the office, he returned to the apartment he shared with his parents and 3 sisters, had lunch, napped, took a walk, and then did a series of strengthening and stretching calisthenics. This was his daily ritual before settling in for the evening, and often far into the night, to what he considered his true life. That's so real. Me right now. A life dedicated to writing. Partially me. Then, whether acting on a long meditated plan or following an obscure sudden intuition, he set down the words of the first hammer-like sentence of what would become his most famous story and one of the defining works of modern imaginative fiction, Metamorphosis, or more simply, The Transformation, where Gregor Samsa woke one morning from troubled dreams, found himself transformed right there in his bed into some sort of monstrous insect. Ever since, readers have been mesmerized, amused, puzzled, irritated, and unsettled by Gregor's life-changing transformation. What does it mean? Where does it come from? How is it possible? What does he mean? Why does he want me to buy apples? Moral of the story is, don't turn into a bug. You can get apples thrown at you and die. Anyways, I'm Sam Vanilla. Thanks for watching. Sorry. We're having a great time. We're doing great. We're doing great. It's fine. It's fine. We got this. We're extremely serious. We're so great at this. Oh my goodness. Why do I have tears in my eyes? Okay. 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 Apples aside, that's for later. The difficulty, if not the impossibility, of answering any of these questions is the key to the story's success. For after the initial statement of narrative fact, a fact that is no dream, neither Gregor nor the narrator wastes any time trying to answer these questions. Yeah, that is true. Plot develops in an implacably? Saying that right. Implacably. Sorry, I learned most of my words from reading them, so I pronounce a lot of them wrong. Implacably logical, straightforward fashion. Characters are introduced and developed. Time and place are otherwise coherent. In short, all the classical rules and conventions of realistic fiction are observed. And yet there is an inexplicable, genre-defying first sentence. Perhaps the effect of this sentence is what Kafka meant when he wrote, years earlier in a letter to a friend, that we did not need books to confirm what we thought we knew about the world. We needed, quotes, books that work like an axe, to chop away at the, in quotes, frozen sea inside us. That first sentence is not just a, oh no. Okay. Like, I used to live in Germany, but I do not recognize that word. uh, Nietzschean hammer, but an axe. Perhaps like the axe that... I don't know how to pronounce this either. I know who... Yes. Wields against two defenseless women in the... Please have patience with me. Crime and punishment. Violent instrument used to assault an ossified sense of what is proper and true in literature as well as in life. Sharpness of its blade is directly related to the story's ability to resist interpretation. Kafka never, to my knowledge, explained his story. The only hint we have that Gregor's transformation was not an isolated, unpremeditated act of inspiration comes from an unfinished novel Kafka wrote a few years earlier, in which the protagonist, engaged to be married, sets his, in quotes, clothed body, I don't know why that has to be specified, out into a world while he remains huddled up in bed in the form of a large beetle. Okay. Ergasamsa, however, is not a beetle, but an insect or vermin. Etymologically unspecific. Yeah. Yes. Kafka famously forbade the publisher of the first edition of the Metamorphosis to represent Gregor in his transformed state in the cover illustration. The insect itself cannot be drawn, and to curious friends, he allowed only that strange things were conspiring in the Kafka apartment, or that the story represented an indiscretion. I like strange things. This edition of the Metamorphosis. Okay. No. Go on. Mm-hmm. Okay. 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 Mm-hmm. The ice weasels? What do you mean the ice weasels? What do you mean that? I don't think we're ever gonna get through this. Oh, not the ice weasels. No, this is both fun, this is, like, it's entertaining, but also I feel bad for people who, like, you know, just want to get to the reading. But also, is it really all that fun if you can't be a little silly on the way? Like, I feel like that enriches the experience. You okay? I understand. Okay. Anyways. This edition of the Metamorphosis attempts to make sense of Kafka's story as well as to acknowledge the impossibility of ever completely succeeding. Susan Bronofsky's new translation gives us a more contemporary, American sense of Kafka's text. American? Then the version that... Then the version that first brought it to English-speaking readers and remained in copyright for over 6 decades. Her version, like any translation, is also an interpretation, carried out rigorously through dictation, syntax, rhythm, and sound. Selection from one of Kafka's other stories and excerpts from his and his contemporaries' diary entries and letters provide biographical. I nailed it. Context. Biographical context for the immediate circumstances of the story's composition and publication. To this context, I have added key scientific, cultural, and literary texts within Kafka's orbit, texts that undoubtedly make a deep impression on him as well as ones that he probably didn't know directly but were a part of the broad shift in thinking that took place in his. These texts, well known to specialists of German literature, have not previously been brought into dialogue with Kafka's story for English language readers. Finally, critical readings document important moments of the story's reception. Sorry, I'm fumbling that sentence. From Kafka's lifetime until the present day. Seri's name is up, but don't hear. Oh, wait. Huh. That's strange. Let me listen back to stream. Oh, stream just froze for me. Froze? Froze. It keeps freezing. Oh. Yeah, I don't hear you on the stream. That's weird. You should be audible. Oh. Hang on. This is evil. Oh no. This means this whole time nobody has been hearing. Can y'all hear now?
So nobody has heard my hello, hello, hello.
Welcome.
Great news! You made it to day 4. People this long.
Okay. Well. That means that people have been. Oh, I feel so stupid now.
Oomph, oomph. No, it's okay. It's okay.
Okay.
Now I have to say the Nietzsche joke again. I have to say the Nietzsche joke again. I'm sorry.
That means that also hasn't been explained about the philosophy that is Nietzsche is a philosophy guy, philosopher.
Yes. Yes, a very famous continental philosopher. That means he's like one of the Germans. Studied him for a little while. Really cool. He's like one of the foundations of existentialism.
Ooh, okay.
Hesse was actually a really big fan of him, believe it or not. Anyway, so there's this comic strip by Matt Groening, the creator of Futurama and The Simpsons, and one of them has like this joke about various philosophers talking about love. So you've got Nietzsche, and the quote that's supposed to be from Nietzsche, but there's no way he actually said this, was, "Love is like a snowmobile racing across the tundra, and then it flips over, pinning you underneath. At night, the ice weasels come."
The ice weasels. Okay. So, in that case, let me think. What else have we missed out on saying? Yeah, the ice weasels.
Why do you want me to buy apples?
Oh, yeah. With the, what does it mean? Where does it come from? How is it possible? Seri chimed in. What does he mean?
What does
he want me to buy apples? Yeah.
So that means we also missed out on Samso, Nella.
Yeah, that's why I was losing it. But, now y'all can hear all the silly little jokes.
Yay!
Yay! Okay. Where leave off?
These texts, well known.
Story, yeah. I found it. Finally, critical readings document important what was lifetime until the present day. Okay. The volume concludes with a timeline of Kafka's and his stories' life as well as a brief bibliography. The period in which Kafka conceived and wrote the Metamorphosis, roughly the decade before World War I, was turbulent and fertile for European science, philosophy, art, and literature.
Fertile is definitely a way to describe that.
Choice word. In particular, Darwin, Nietzsche, and Freud. Oh, that guy. Profoundly altered the ways of thinking about the relations between humans and animals. In literature and art, iconoclastic modernist writers and artists sought to break with the norms. Sought to break with the norms of 19th century realism. It is the period of the French Fauvists and Picasso's Demoiselles?
Demoiselles d'Avignon.
It might be French, but I can't read French. Of Adolf Loos?
I don't know this one.
I don't know this either. For an architecture...
Polemic.
For an architecture without ornament. Or of the atonal music works of Webern and Schoenberg. Of Kandinsky's Manifesto for Abstract or Spiritual Art. Of George Haynes' Expressionist City Poetry and Frank...
I don't know. It's the same spelling as Spider's George, though.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm like... What? I'm trying to figure out how to say that last name. I promise, once we get to the actual reading, we will be able to get through this a lot easier.
Do we just bite the bullet on this one?
Hang on, let me look. Homosexuality! Sorry.
Homosexuality!
Sorry, I saw it. I was like, yeah!
Fork found in kitchen.
Okay. You know what? I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit in the preface. Kafka's fraught Jewish identity, he was never kept kosher or regularly attended synagogue, but frequently, almost exclusively, Jewish German circles, was constantly tested and strengthened in an age of rabid nationalism, Jewish self-hatred, and anti-Semitism. In the panorama of modern European literature, there is nothing quite like Gregor Samsa's grotesque, bizarre, disgusting yet profoundly human shape. But during Kafka's time, both scientists and writers have published work on animals and insects that bear an interesting relation to the metamorphosis. Common to all was the desire to contest the traditional anthropomorphic understanding of the relation between animals and humans. The Baltic German biologist Jacob von... that's a last name I cannot say... caused quite a stir in 1909 with his call for science to give up a human-centric perspective for the standpoint of the animal, which must take absolute precedence. His work attempted to explore the inner world of animals, especially the quote-unquote lower, simpler life forms, such as the tick or the jellyfish. He also wrote for a non-specialist audience and corresponded with writers such as Rainer Maria
Rilke,
whose animal poems have already affected just such a reversal. Rilke's well-known poem, The Panther, begins with the zoo animal's perspective of his immediate caged environment, not ours, which hardly enters its consciousness. The eerie, fantastic drawings on Kafka's Prague contemporary Alfred Kubin also draw on insect and animal amalgamations, suggesting a horrifying proximity to human beings. Kafka knew Kubin personally and once confided his admiration for Kubin's artwork in perhaps his 1909 novel, The Other Side. Most pertinently for the young Kafka, the wunderkind poet and dramatist Hugo von Hoff Hoffmannsthal Hoffman?
Close enough.
Good. Wrote a fictional letter describing the language crisis of a Lord Chandler. A little too close for Chandler for me.
Go for gold!
Whose silence coincides with an uncanny ability to flow into everyday objects and animals. The hero in a field, a dog, a beetle swimming on the surface of water in a bucket. He even puts himself mentally and emotionally into the perspective of the rats in his cellar attempting to escape the poisons he set out for them. Poison, yes, the poison for Cusco. Cusco's poison. That poison? Yes. When Kafka was beginning to write, he virtually worshipped Hoffmannsthal. The letter of Lord Chandos is not so much a source as a springboard for Kafka's writing, which, starting with Gregor Samsa's transformation, again and again probes the question of what is human by way of animal figures. Though they cannot claim to fully represent the now vast secondary literature of Kafka's masterpiece, the critical essays in this volume embody key moments in the 100-year history of its interpretation. When Kafka died in 1924, his work was virtually unknown. I don't know why I just kind of spaced out for a second. It might have disappeared forever if key interpreters, including Walter Benjamin, Hannah Arendt,
yes.
yeah, and Theodore Adorno?
Adorno.
Okay. Had not rescued it from the grip of the Nazis by making it known to French and English-speaking audiences in the 1930s while in exile. Jewish-German philosopher Gunther Anders, who, like his then-wife, Hannah Arendt, had fled to France in 1933, delivered a series of lectures on Kafka that he published as a small book after the war. The excerpts published here constitute one of the most penetrating analyses of I'm great with words. Of Kafka's use of language and literization of metaphor. Walter Sokol, like Anders, a German-speaking Jew forced to emigrate during the Nazi period, taught German at Columbia University and became one of the earliest and most authoritative academic experts on Kafka. Written in the then-current mode of new criticism, which avoided overt historical and social analysis, his essay provides a close reading of the story's psychology and shows the benefits of Gregor's metamorphosis in the power struggle with his family. Nina Pelikan?
I guess.
Bird? Strauss's essay is one of the earliest feminist readings of an author and a text that, as she notes, have been almost exclusively interpreted from a male point of view. Shifts attention away from Gregor to his sister. I don't know why I forgot how to say her name.
Greta,
okay. That should have been easy, I panicked. The healthy counterpart, in quotations healthy, counterpart to her brother's monstrosity, while also suggesting that the story embodies Kafka's fantasy of a gender role. My own essay situates Kafka's story in the aestheticizing context of... Oh no, more French.
I don't know.
I don't know, we'll get there. Skip. That argues Gregor Samsa becomes a kind of modernist work of art, abstract and ultimately indecipherable. Looking through this, it might just be good to skip, because it's like pretty much at the end of the preface. I've been struggling with the reading.
It's alright. Do you want to just skip over the translator's note as well?
Maybe. It's a lot shorter. So
A lot shorter, but I think you'd struggle a lot more with the pronunciation.
looks at you with my big wet eyes.
Looks at you with my big wet eyes.
Would you like to read it?
The translator's note?
Mm-hmm.
I'm down. It might come out kind of cursed with my mic, though.
It's fine, it's fine. I mean, like, mine is probably a little cursed as well, considering, I'm still kind of trying to figure out what settings I need for OBS, because it's different than all of my recording software.
All right.
I believe in
See.
you. Yay!
Let's do this. Kafka's celebrated novella, The Metamorphosis, was written a century ago, in late 1912, during a period in which he was having difficulty making progress on his first novel. On November 17th, 1912, Kafka... Ah!
You're
Kafka
fine.
wrote
You're
to his
fine.
fiancée, Felice Bauer, that he was working on a story that came to me in my misery lying in bed and now was haunting him. He
Me
hoped
all
to
the
get it
time,
written
for real,
down
for
quickly.
real.
He hadn't yet...
Are you okay? Oh no. Oh no. Did you cut out? Oh no. Let me see. Stream seems fine. I can't. Okay, hang on. We may be having difficulties. We still haven't even gotten to the actual book. We're on the translator's notes. Okay. Hmm. Let me see. OBS isn't indicating that Seri is speaking at all. I don't think it's my end. Yeah, my Wi-Fi says it's pretty good right now. Well, we'll figure it out. Oh my goodness, it's almost been an hour. Yeah, it might be a issue. I might actually go look ahead in the reading.
Oomph!
There you are! There you are! Hi!
Hi! What the hell happened?
I don't know! You just went silent after after you said, about came to me in my misery lying in bed and was now haunting him, and I was like, me for real, for real. And then you cut out, and I was like, is everything okay? Did I accidentally make you upset by interrupting?
I'm so sorry.
And then, like, 2 seconds later, when you were still silent, I was like, oh no, it's connection issues.
Oh my god. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine, it's fine.
We're really having a day, aren't we?
We're having a stream. But hey, it's fine. It's cool. It's
most scuffed stream ever.
It's certainly not the most scuffed. And hey, at least we'll have the VOD this time, unlike debut.
True, true.
I take a sip of my dink.
Okay.
Have hot cocoa with me.
Hey.
Tasty, very tasty.
Okay.
With the poison for Cusco.
So
Cusco's poison. That's poison. That poison.
Okay, let's see. So I left off at came to me in my misery lying in bed and now was haunting him. He hoped to get it written down quickly. He hadn't yet realized how long it would be, as he felt it would turn out best if he could write it in just 1 or 2 long sittings.
Interesting.
But there were many interruptions, and and he complained to Felice several times that the delays were damaging the story. 3 weeks later, it was finished on December 7th, so it would be another 3 years before the story saw print.
Oh.
As we know from Max Brod's diary, Kafka read his bug piece, or Wanzenach, which I'm probably not pronouncing right, aloud to friends on November 24th, 1912, the first section,
The misery.
and again on December 15th. Oh, the misery.
wait, we gotta be careful when saying. But I think that should be fun, just saying that part.
Fuck, you're right.
Keep forgetting. We're so cooked.
People started talking about it, and Kafka received a query from publisher Kurt Wolff in March 1913 on the recommendation of Kafka's friend Franz Werfel. I'm not pronouncing that right. I'm so sorry.
I hope nobody German comes in here and gets very sad, because I am so sorry.
Oh my god, this cave is full of incorrect pronunciation.
Again, I feel especially bad because I used to live in Germany. I've lost
And now you
so
don't.
much. And now I don't.
I guess it is what it is.
That's that.
Anyway. Franz Blei, the literary editor of the New Avant-Garde journal. I'm not gonna say that. I can't say that.
I
expressed interest.
Latter? Something like that.
Yeah, sure, let's go with that.
Because that B looking thing is like like S.
I thought it was like a like Scheiss.
I don't know. I know it's in Fußball sometimes.
Interesting.
I don't know exactly. Again, it's been a very, very long time.
Okay. And Robert Musil wrote as well, soliciting the novella for the more established Die Neue Rundschau, though it was technically too long for the magazine's format. But months passed before Kafka had a clean manuscript ready for submission, and then World War I intervened, causing further delays. Musil was called up to serve, and because of the war, Blei decided to stop printing literary texts.
Okay, yeah, so it is
Curb.
just the... Thank you, Curb. I appreciate that a lot. I remember something!
Thank you!
I remember.
Yay! Let's see. Because of the war, Blei decided to stop printing literary texts. In the spring of 1915, René Schickele took over as editor-in-chief of Die Weißen Blätter. Was I saying that right?
I mean, it's close, probably? Question mark?
Fuck it. And with Max Brod's help, Kafka placed his story there. It came out on October 15th, congratulations, it's gay, and then appeared in December 1915, though dated 1916, as a slender volume published by Kurt Wolff Verlag in Leipzig. The story's protagonist, Gregor Samsa, is the quintessential Kafka anti-hero. He has worked himself to the point of utter exhaustion to pay off his parents' debts, and his grotesque metamorphosis as a physical manifestation of his abasement. What exactly is he transformed into? In Kafka's correspondence to this publisher, he was adamant that the insect not be depicted on the jacket of the book. And although he and his friends use the word bug or wanze when referring casually to the story, the language that appears in the novella itself is carefully chosen to avoid specificity. The epithet ungeheuer is ungezeifer. I probably did not say that right. In the opening sentence, poses one of the greatest challenges to the translator. Both the adjective ungeheuer, meaning monstrous or huge, and the noun ungezeifer are negations, virtual non-entities, prefixed by un. Ungeziefer comes from the Middle High German Ungezieber, a negation of the Old High German Zebad, related to Old English tever, meaning sacrifice or sacrificial animal. Oh no, I don't like the implications.
Oh no.
An Ungezieber then is an unclean animal unfit for sacrifice.
Hmm.
And Ungezeitfe describes a class of nasty, creepy, crawly things.
Be nice
A word
to
in German
bugs.
suggests primarily what?
I said be nice to bugs, everyone.
Literally, sometimes they might be snack.
Not what I meant. Not what I meant. Not.
Sometimes they might also be a 35-year-old war veteran. You never know.
It's just how it is.
Anyway, the word in German suggests primarily six-legged
Be nice to bugs is right, but not in my
critters.
house. I always take the bugs out of my house. I literally have a designated bug cup, and I just put them outside. This one time
I love that about you. Do you want a kiss?
Yay! There's this one time, real quick, story time. When I had a really bad headache, and I was just feeling really sick. I asked someone, "Hey, could you go get me some ibuprofen?" Okay, yes, exactly. And you know, when I was woken up later, they tell me, "Hey, hold out your hand," and I expect there to be ibuprofen. So I open up my hand, and instead I'm given a live cicada. And it made me feel better, you know, because I was looking at a live cicada, and I like cicadas. But it was the middle of winter. So I don't know why there was a live cicada there.
It was there through the power of love and incredible violence.
Anyways, you can continue.
Anyway, where were we?
I physically jump off the ground.
Crib
I
says,
was
I would
on my
physically
mattress,
jump
so
off the ground.
so I did not jump, because I was already laying there.
Okay, here we go. The word in German suggests primarily six-legged critters, though it otherwise resembles the English word vermin, which refers primarily to rodents. Ungeziefer is also used informally as the equivalent of bug, though the connotation is dirty, nasty bug. You wouldn't apply the word to cute, helpful creatures like ladybugs.
There is actually, fun fact.
In my translation,
Sorry to interrupt again, but there are some ladybug species that look like. No, there are some roach species that look like ladybugs.
really?
Yeah, isn't that cool? I love bugs. I love them so
That
much.
is really cool. Oh my gosh. Of course you love bugs.
What is that
The bug
supposed to mean?
enjoyer.
Yay, that's me.
Smiles. Okay, let's see. Where were we?
In my translation.
Okay. In my translation, Gregor is transformed into some sort of monstrous insect, with some sort of added to blur the borders of the somewhat too specific insect. I think Kafka wanted us to see Gregor's new body and condition with the same hazy focus with which Gregor himself discovers them. The same blurred focus applies to other aspects of the story. Although Vladimir Nabokov, with his penchant for exactitude, has mapped out the sums of flat in some detail, I am far from certain that Kafka himself, with his penchant for... Sorry, my monitor turned off for some reason.
It's fine. Took a sip of my dink.
With his penchant for the blurred perceptions of bewilderment, was much concerned with the apartment's precise geography. How many rooms does his apartment have? Many, too many. Just as Gregor, lying on his back in the story's opening sentences, discovers he has these many little legs waving in the air above him. Both are physical correlatives of a life that has gotten out of hand. Kafka is not even particularly attentive to the continuity of his cast of characters. Early on in the story, we see the maid give notice and flee, only to find her still working in the household several pages later, and in fact doing all the cooking, since it is now it is the cook who quit. Except for the charwoman, who plays a starring role in the penultimate scenes. The household help is just part of the furniture of the story, like the cabinets that get shifted to another room. Even the main characters tend to appear categorically, named only by their functions: father, mother, sister. Only one of them gets a name: Greta. Rhymes with beta. Greta! Okay. But even she is usually referred to only as sister throughout, until the decisive moment near the end, when she becomes instead a daughter. By defining all these characters through their relationship to Gregor, Kafka slyly allows Gregor's point of view to dominate the story even when he's not actually present in the scene being described. One leitmotif I was unable to preserve in translation is the theme of ruhig or unruhig. I probably did not pronounce it right, but ruhig denotes calm, peaceful, quiet, tranquil, at ease, and unruhig its opposite. Starring with the unruhigen Traben or troubled dreams. And in the first sentence, the narrative oscillates between untroubled and troubled, tranquil and harried, peaceful and unsettled. Since no one word in English fits well enough in all the contexts Kafka presents, I decided to translate the word in many different ways. But note when you are unreading all these synonyms that you are watching a motif unfold. The post-metamorphosis activity that gives Gregor the greatest sense of freedom appears in my translation as crawling. He enjoys crawling around the walls and ceiling of his room. Ironically, the German verb kriechen, which also translates to creep, has the additional meaning of to cower. To kriechen before someone is to act sycophantically toward him. In this sense, too, Gregor's new physical state appears as a representation of his long-standing spiritual abjectness. Oh my god, it's literally Gegington's Sam's Olympus Company. What? I'm right. You know I'm right. I'm right.
But yes, but like, yeah, because he was based off of this.
It goes deep. Anyway. Finally, Gregor has only himself to blame for the wretchedness of his situation, since he has willingly accepted wretchedness as it was thrust upon him. Like other of Kafka's doomed protagonists, he errs by failing to act, instead allowing himself to be acted upon. So this is why suddenly one day is a sloth skill.
Oh wait, that does make sense, yeah.
Yi-sang! Yi-sang!
He's not here!
He's here in spirit!
He's not here! Ideal!
Gregor Samsa, Giant Bug, is a cartoon of the subaltern, a human being turned inside out. He is traded in his spine for an exoskeleton. But even this armor-like shell, carapace and armor are the same word in German, Panzer, which is also used to describe tanks.
Is that a Panzer tank? Picking up that sugar craze. Sorry, that's... Sorry, I'll have to show you the reference later.
His armor-like shell is no defense once his suddenly powerful father starts pelting him with apples, an ironically biblical choice of weapon. Gregor is a salesman, but what he sold is himself, his own agency and dignity.
Pokemon
Snap! Yeah. Gregor's a salesman, but what he sold is himself, his own agency and dignity, making him a sellout through and through. For this reason, I occasionally use the word drummer, commercial traveler, to describe his profession, referring back to another of his ilk, a hardworking drummer who landed in the ash can like all the rest of them. That's Willie Loman, as described by Arthur Miller in Death of a Salesman. Throw apples at people is crazy.
This really was our Pokemon
But yeah,
Snap.
Death of a Salesman mentioned. I love Death of a Salesman.
Ooh.
Very good play. The Metamorphosis is Kafka's own Death of a Salesman, with all the sad, grubby tragedy, all the squalor. Like Willie Loman, Gregor is a suicide, though of a different sort. He dies a hunger artist, perishing of starvation because nothing tastes good to him anymore. And like Willie's, Gregor's death is the final service he performs for the benefit of his family. I see the connection, what the fuck? At the same time, Kafka's tragicomic tale, unlike Miller's, is very often hilariously funny.
Sound like a metaphor.
I imagine
for
Kafka...
True. Anyways.
Literally. I imagine Kafka laughing uproariously when reading this story to his friends.
Crazy.
Gregor's naivete, one might also call it gullibility.
I think that's naivete.
Combined with his earnestness.
Is it? I don't know.
I've only ever heard it pronounced as naivete.
I've heard it as naivete. I don't know.
Fuck.
We're at a standstill.
Let's just continue.
Yeah, but let's just keep going because it has been
So it is naivete. Got it.
Yeah, naivete. Yay! Got it.
Yeah. Gregor's naivete, one might also call it gullibility, combined with his earnestness and his tendency to sound somewhat overwrought in his assertions, is perfectly risible. Or risible? Fuck, I've heard the word before.
And I was like, riz?
Risible.
Would you
to
be
bring out
rizzed
this
by
side
a
of the
giant
story,
bug?
I've emphasized... What?
Would you be rizzed by a giant bug?
If the giant bug was you.
Giggles. Anyways, continue.
To bring out this side of the story, I've emphasized the slight tone of hysteria in Gregor's voice whenever it seems justified. The story is brutally comic in parts, and ever more so than at the moment when it is revealed that despite the fact that Gregor has been living more or less as an indentured servant to pay off his parents' ancient debts, in fact the family has plenty of money, not enough to allow them to stop working altogether, but a proper little nest egg. And although they are described as poor, they are never too hard up not to retain the services of at least one domestic servant. One last translation problem is the story, or in the story is the title itself. Unlike the English Metamorphosis, the German Verwandlung does not suggest a natural change of state associated with the animal kingdom, such as a change from caterpillar to butterfly. Instead, it is a word from fairy tales used to describe the transformation, say, of a girl's 7 brothers into swans. Wait a second. That's an abnormality! That's an abnormality!
Everything was leading up to Project Moon.
Literally, though, mentioning a girl's 7 brothers turning into swans, that's Dream of a Black Swan.
Ooh.
The abnormality Dream of a Black Swan. There's even the brothers. They're the little white
Wow.
bitches. Seriously, go look them up. Put them on screen if you have to. We have to see the little white bitches. Oh no.
Hang on.
Do you see the shit oomph?
I think I do. Hang on a second. Hang on a second.
It's the brothers.
Hang on a second. Okay, yeah, I think. Did you actually search that verbatim? I did not search it like that. Hang on. Okay. Yeah, we're including this.
You
read this?
It's necessary. You have to understand.
This?
Let me see. Let me see. Where are they?
Is it them?
I can't see. Where are the little white bitches?
The swanling.
We are the swanlings. Please feed.
Do you see them?
My stream might be a little delayed.
Ah. Well.
Oh, I see them now. I see them now.
Yeah.
I see them now. My
Goodness.
god.
We're. Oh my goodness. It's such a scuffed stream. I'm having a great time though, and that's what matters.
I love it. I love it.
We're keeping them there.
Yay! Okay, so. But the word metamorphosis refers to this too. Its first definition in the Oxford English Dictionary is the action or process of changing in form, shape, or substance, especially transformation by supernatural means. This is the sense in which it's used, for instance, in translations of Ovid. As a title for this rich, complex story, it strikes me as the most luminous, suggestive choice. Susan Bernofsky, August 2013. All right, who's ready for the Geggington at long last?
At long last. It's to the very first page. We're finally there. Oh my goodness, there's so many footnotes.
5 of them.
They're huge. Okay. Claps my hand, rubs them together like some manner of insect.
Let's fucking go.
Alright. When Gregor Samsa woke one morning from troubled dreams, he found himself transformed right there in his bed into some sort of monstrous insect. He was lying on his back, which was hard, like a carapace, and when he raised his head a little, he saw his curved brown belly segmented by rigid arches atop which blanket, already slipping, was just barely managing to cling. His many legs, pitifully thin compared to the rest of him, waved helplessly before his eyes. What in the world happened to me? He thought. It was no dream. His room, a proper human room, if admittedly rather too small, lay peacefully between the 4 familiar walls. Above the table, where an unpacked collection of cloth samples was arranged, Samsa was a traveling salesman, hung the picture he had recently clipped from a glossy magazine and placed in an attractive gilt frame. The picture showed a lady in a fur hat and a fur boa who sat erect, holding out to the viewer a heavy fur muff in which her entire forearm had vanished. Gregor's gaze then shifted to the window, where the bleak weather, raindrops could be heard striking the metal sill, made him feel quite melancholy. What if I just go back to sleep for a little while and forget all this foolishness? He thought. But this proved utterly impossible, for it was his habit to sleep on his right side, and in his present state, he was unable to assume this position. So real for this. No matter how forcefully he thrust himself onto his side, he kept rolling back. Perhaps 100 times he attempted it, closing his eyes so as to not have seen those struggling legs, and relented only when he began to feel a faint dull ache in his side, unlike anything he had ever felt before. Oh my goodness. I don't know why, but like I'm laughing about it now again. Like the first time I read it, I was like, "Oh, it's so sad," but like it is kind of funny.
Fuck, he's so relatable.
Yeah, it's like, dude, just like me, for real, for real. Oh my goodness.
Good lord, he thought. What? What?
No, go on, go on.
Good lord, he thought. What an exhausting profession I've chosen. Day in and day out on the road. Work like this is far more unsettling than business conducted at home. And then I have the agony of traveling itself to contend with, worrying about train connections, the irregular, unpalatable meals, and human intercourse that is constantly changing. Never developing the least constancy or warmth. Devil take it all. He felt a faint itch high up on his belly, still on his back. He laboriously edged himself over to the bedpost so he could raise his head more easily, identified the site of the itch, a cluster of tiny white dots he was unable to judge, and wanted to probe the spot with a leg, but drew it back again at once, for the touch sent cold shivers rippling through him. Okay, so the bit about human intercourse refers to social interactions, but also tourism, business exchanges.
The typical meaning.
the other definition. Yeah.
That was a choice translation. That was a choice translation.
Damn right. Yeah. He slid back into his earlier position. All this early rising, he thought, it's enough to make one soft in the head. Human beings need their sleep. Other traveling salesmen live like harem girls.
Crazy. Gregor, what?
When I go back to the boarding house, for example, to copy out the morning's commissions, why these gentlemen may still be sitting at breakfast.
Ooh, you've heard of this book before? Okay, okay.
I mean, if you're a Limbus fan, you definitely have.
Yeah.
But...
There's just...
When I go back to the boarding house, for example, to copy out the morning's commissions, why these gentlemen may still be sitting at breakfast. I'd like to see my boss's face if I tried that sometime. He'd can me on the spot. Although, who knows, maybe that would be the best thing for me. If I didn't have to hold back for my parents' sake, I'd have given notice long ago. I'd have marched right up to him and given him a piece of my mind.
What?
He'd have fallen right off his desk. And what an odd custom that is. Perching high up atop one's elevated desk and from this considerable height addressing one's employee down below. Especially as the latter is obligated to stand quite close because his boss is hard of hearing. Well, hope is not yet lost. As soon as I've saved up enough money to pay back what my parents owe him, another 5 or 6 years ought to be enough. I'll most definitely do just that. This will be the great parting of ways. For the time being, though, I've got to get up. My train leaves at 5. Apparently the debt could be financial, but also moral or psychological guilt.
Oh my goodness.
Damn, Kafka. And he glanced over at the alarm clock ticking away atop the wardrobe. Heavenly Father, he thought. It was 6:30, and the clock's hands kept shifting calmly forward. In fact, the half hour had already passed. It was getting on towards 6:45. Could the alarm have failed to ring? Even from the bed, one could see it was properly set to 4 o'clock. It must have rung. Yes, but was it possible to sleep tranquilly through this furniture-shaking racket? Well, his sleep hadn't exactly been tranquil. But no doubt that's why it had been so sound. But what should he do now? The next train was at 7 o'clock. To catch it, he would have to rush like a madman. Hold on, my monitor turned off again.
That's okay. This is something I had always thought of when I first started, and genuinely just how it's like, oh no, I'm a bug now, and then he immediately starts thinking about, oh, man, I gotta go to work today. Like,
He's so me.
like, I'm too employed for this.
You're right. See. You'd have to rush like a madman, and his sample case wasn't even packed yet. And he himself felt far from agile or alert. And even if he managed to catch this train, his boss was certain to unleash a thunderstorm of invective upon his head. For the clerk who met the 5 o'clock train had no doubt long since reported Gregor's absence. This clerk was the boss's underling, a creature devoid of backbone and wit. What if he called in sick? But that would be mortifying and also suspicious, since Gregor had never once been ill in all his 5 years of service.
Imagine he goes outside and everyone just acts like it's normal. That would be really funny, honestly.
It would really add to Kafka's absurdism, I think.
It would, and also, I mean, like, think about it. Interesting marketing. You could be like, you know, a bug selling fabrics and being like, oh yeah, I know the silkworm that made the silk for this. Yeah. Like,
yeah, we boiled him alive. It was awesome.
I loved listening to his shrieks of pain.
Let's see. Gregor had never once been ill in all his 5 years of service. No doubt his boss would come calling with the company doctor, would reproach Gregor's parents for his son's laziness, silencing all objections by referring them to this doctor, in whose opinion there existed only healthy individuals unwilling to work. And would the doctor be so terribly wrong in this instance? Aside from mild drowsiness that was certainly superfluous after so many hours of sleep, Gregor felt perfectly fine. In fact, he was ravenous.
Okay.
While he was considering these matters with a
No, I did not get the silk from the spider myself.
Shaw!
Alright, you want me to go over from here?
Go for it.
Alright. While he was considering these matters with the greatest possible speed, yet still without managing to make up his mind to leave the bed, the clock was just striking 7:15. A timid knock came at the door at the head of his bed. Gregor, a voice called. It was his mother. It's 7:15. Didn't you want to catch the train? Your train. That gentle voice. Gregor flinched when he heard his own in response. It was unmistakably his own voice, but now it had been infiltrated, as if from below, by a tortured peeping sound. Piepsen in German, a sound often thought not exclusively associated with smaller animals. That was impossible to suppress. Leaving each word intact, comprehensible, but only for an instant before so completely annihilating it, as it continued to reverberate that a person could not tell for sure whether his ears were deceiving. Gregor had meant to give a proper response explaining everything. Under the circumstances, he limited himself to saying, "Yes, thank you, Mother. I'm just getting up." Because of the wooden door, the change in Gregor's voice appeared not to be noticeable from the other side, for his mother was reassured by his response and shuffled off. But their brief conversation had alerted the other family members that Gregor was unexpectedly still at home, and already his father was knocking at one of the room's side doors softly, but with his fist. "Gregor! Gregor!" he called. "What's the problem?" "What's the problem, Arthur?" Sorry. And after a short while, He repeated his question in a deeper register. Gregor. Meanwhile, at the other side door came his sister's faint lament. Lament? Sorry. Gregor, are you unwell? Do you
Lament.
need anything? Just a second, Gregor answered in both directions at once, making an effort by enunciating as clearly as possible and inserting long pauses between the individual words to remove anything conspicuous from his voice. In fact, his father returned to breakfast, but his sister whispered, Gregor, open the door, I implore you. But Gregor had no intention of opening the door. He praised the cautious habit he had acquired while traveling of locking all his doors at night, even at home. First, he would get up calmly and undisturbed. He would get dressed, and above all, have breakfast, and only then would he consider his next steps. For all these supine contemplations, he suddenly realized, would yield to no useful results. He recalled often having felt mild aches and pains in bed, caused perhaps by lying in an awkward position. This pain had then proved to be a figment of his imagination the moment he got up. He was curious to see how this morning's imaginations would gradually fade. The change in his voice was nothing more than the harbinger of a proper head cold, an occupational hazard among traveling salesmen. This he doubted not in the least. This he doubted not in the least. It was simple enough to
Least.
Hey.
The snail simulator's taking over.
It was simple enough to rid himself of the blanket. He needed only puff himself up a bit, and it fell right off. But the rest proved difficult, not least because he was so exceedingly wide. He would have needed arms and hands to prop himself up, but instead, all he had were these many little legs, variously in motion. He was unable to control. If he tried to bend one leg, it would be the first to straighten. And when he finally succeeded in getting one leg to do his bidding, all the others went flailing about in an unnerving frenzy. Enough of this lying uselessly in bed, Gregor said to himself. At first he tried to maneuver the lower part of his body out the bed, but this lower part, which, by the way, he had not yet seen and couldn't properly imagine, proved too unwieldy. It all went so slowly, and when at last, half mad with impatience, he thrust himself recklessly forward with all his strength, it was in the wrong direction and he slammed against the lower bedpost. The throbbing pain he had felt instructed him that, for now, at least the lower part of his body was perhaps the most sensitive. So he decided to try leading instead with his upper body and carefully twisted his head towards the edge of the bed. This was easily accomplished. And in the end, despite his width and weight, the mass of his body slowly followed the turning of his head. But once his head was dangling in midair outside the bed, he was afraid to keep shifting forward like this, since if eventually he had to let himself fall in this position, it would be practically a miracle if his head escaped injury. Right now, he had to keep his wits about him at all costs, even if it meant staring where he was. Least.
No head injury for Gregor. Surely you have to understand.
He's learning to stand and walk again. He's doing great.
But when...
Go on.
Yeah. But when, sighing after redoubled efforts, he found himself lying there as before, watching his little legs engaged in their struggles, perhaps more flailingly now, and seeing no possible way to bring calm or order to this chaos. He told himself once more that he could not possibly remain lying here any longer, and that the most sensible thing would be to sacrifice anything and everything, as long as there remained even the slightest hope of liberating himself from the bed. Simultaneously, though, he continued to remind himself that calm consideration, indeed the calmest consideration, the kind of calm consideration that gets you into the water zone, was far preferable to resolutions seized on in despair. At such moments, he fixed his eyes as sharply as possible on the window, but regrettably the view of the morning fog, which veiled even the far side of the narrow street, offered little by way of optimism and good spirits. 7 o'clock already, he said to himself as the clock struck once more. Already 7 and still such dense fog. And for a little while he lay there quietly, his breathing shallow in the expectation, perhaps, that this perfect silence might possibly restore the real and ordinary state of things. Then he said to himself, before it strikes 7:15, I must absolutely have gotten myself completely out of bed. Besides, by then someone will have come from the office to inquire after me, as the office opens before 7. And he now set himself to rocking his body out of the bed as evenly as possible along his entire length.
Wait a second.
If he allowed himself to fall from bed like this, his head...
So if the office opens before 7, open at 6?
Might have opened at 5.
6, 7?
My God.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Oh my goodness.
It's beautiful, though.
The mental image of a roach in a suit on a 9 to 5. Literally.
He's doing his best.
He's doing his best.
If he allowed himself to fall from bed like this, his head, which he intended to lift up cleanly as he fell, would in all likelihood remain unharmed. His back seemed to be hard. Surely it would sustain no damage as he fell to the rug. His greatest concern was what to do about the loud crash that would clearly result. No doubt, calling forth no terror, perhaps, but certainly alarm behind each door. Nonetheless, it would have to be ventured. By the time Gregor was already protruding halfway out of bed, this new method was more a game than a struggle. All he had to do was keep rocking sideways a little at a time. It occurred to him how simple things would be if only someone came to his aid. 2 strong individuals. He was thinking of his father and the maidservant. Would suffice. All they'd have to do was slip their arms beneath his curved back to scoop him out of bed, then crouch down with their burden and wait patiently for him to flip himself over onto the floor, where he hoped those tiny legs of his would take on some meaning. But even aside from the fact that the doors were locked, should he really call for help? Despite his distress, he couldn't help smiling at the thought. Already he'd reached the point where the vigorous rocking motion was making it almost impossible for him to keep his balance, and soon he would have to make up his mind and take the plunge, for 7:15 was only 5 minutes away. When the front doorbell rang. "It's someone from the office," he said to himself, and nearly froze while his little legs went on scrabbling all the more frenetically. For a moment all was still. They won't answer, Gregor said to himself, caught up in some deluded hope. But then, of course, as always, the maid strode resolutely to the door and opened it. Gregor need only hear the visitor's first words of greeting to know who it was. The general manager himself.
Oh, he's in trouble.
Why, oh why? Why, oh why, was Gregor condemned to serve in a firm where even the most negligible falling short was enough to arouse the greatest possible suspicion? Was every last one of the firm's employees a scoundrel? Was there not a single loyal, devoted soul among them who would be driven mad by pangs of conscience should he fail to make the best possible use of even just a few morning hours for his employer's benefit, such that his guilt would render him virtually incapable of rising from his bed? Would it really not have sufficed to send an apprentice to inquire, if indeed such inquiries were necessary at all? Did the general manager have to come in person, and was it necessary to demonstrate to the entire innocent family that the investigation of this... And was it necessary to demonstrate to the entire innocent family that the investigation of this suspicious matter could be entrusted only to the general manager's sharp intellect? And more because of the agitation aroused in Gregor by this train of thought than because of some proper resolution on his part. He swung himself out of bed with all his might. There was a loud thud. You couldn't really call it a crash. The rug cushioned the impact a little, and since his back was more elastic than he'd thought, the resulting sound was muffled and not so obvious. But he hadn't managed to hold his head up carefully enough and had bumped it. He turned it this way and that, pressing it against the rug in his vexation and pain. Would you like to continue?
Yay. Alright. Claps my hands together and rubs them together like a bug. Something just fell in there, the general manager now said in the room on the left. Gregor tried to imagine whether anything like what he was now experiencing could ever befall the general manager. Possibility must certainly be admitted, but if as brusque is
Brusquely.
yeah, okay. Woo! I did it. But as if brusquely dismissing the question, the manager now took a few purposeful steps in the next room, making his patent leather boots creak. In the room on the right came the whisper of Gregor's sister informing him, "Gregor, the general manager is here." "I know," Gregor murmured, but he didn't dare raise his voice high enough for his sister to hear. "Gregor," his father now said from the room on the left, "the general manager has come to inquire why you failed to depart by the early train. We don't know what to tell him. Besides, he'd like to have a word with you in person, so please open the door. I'm sure he'll be kind enough not to take offense at the untidiness of your room." "Good morning, Herr Samsa," the general manager now cried out in a friendly tone. "He isn't well," Gregor's mother said to the general manager while his father was still having his say beside the stove. "Not well at all. Take my word for it, sir. Why else would Gregor miss his train? Office is the only thing that boy ever thinks of. It really bothers me that he never goes out in the evening. He's been back in the city an entire week now, but he spent every last evening at home. He just sits at the table with us, quietly reading the newspaper, or else studies the timetables. Even just doing woodworking projects seems to entertain him. Carved a little picture frame, for example. Did it in 2 or 3 evenings with his fret saw. You'll be amazed how pretty it is. It's hanging there in his room. You'll see it in a minute when Gregor opens the door. Oh, and I'm so glad you paid us a visit, sir. On our own, we'd never have managed to persuade Gregor to open up. He's so stubborn, and surely he isn't well, even though he denied it this morning." I think the messy room is the least of his worries. Be right there, Gregor said, not moving so as to not miss a single word of their conversation. "No other explanation, madame, is conceivable to me," the general manager said. "Let us hope it is nothing grave, though on the other hand, I would note that, as businessmen, fortunately or unfortunately, as one will, we are very often obliged to suppress indispositions out of consideration for the firm. So are you ready to let the general manager in?" Gregor's impatient father asked, knocking again at the door. "No," Gregor responded. Or, as Wambus would say, "No."
We are not friends.
We are not friends. In the left-handed room, horrified silence, while in the room on the right, Gregor's sister began to sob. Why didn't his sister go to join the others? She must have just gotten out of bed and had not yet begun to dress. And why was she crying? Because he wasn't getting up and opening his door to the general manager? Because he was in danger of losing his position? Because his boss would then start hounding his parents once more over their ancient debt? For the time being, all such worries were assured unnecessary. Gregor was still here, and abandoning his family was the furthest thing from his thoughts. At the moment, to be sure, he was lying on the rug, and no one familiar with his current state would seriously expect him to let the general manager in. But surely he wouldn't be sent packing just like that because of so trivial an act of discourtesy, for which it would be simple enough to find an appropriate excuse later on. And it seemed to Gregor it would be far more sensible to just leave him in peace rather than disturbing him with all this weeping and cajoling. But the others were distressed by the uncertainty of it all. Their behavior was understandable. Hang on, let me get to the page in a more suitable position. Herr Samsa, the general manager, now called out, raising his voice. "What has come over you? You barricade yourself in your room, you reply to queries only with yes and no, you cause your parents onerous, unnecessary worries, and you are neglecting, let me permit myself to note, your professional responsibilities in a truly unprecedented manner. I speak here in the name of your parents, as well as your employer, and in all seriousness must ask you for a clear and immediate explanation. I'm astonished, utterly astonished. I've always known you as a calm, sensible person, and now it seems you've begun to permit yourself the most whimsical extravagances. To be sure, the boss did suggest one possible explanation for your absence this morning. It concerns cash payments recently entrusted to your care. and truthfully, I all but gave him my word of honor that this explanation could not be correct. But confronted here with your incomprehensible obstinacy, I find myself losing all desire I might have to come to your defense, and your position is anything but secure. It was originally my intention to discuss all this with you in private conversation, but since you compel me to waste my time here, I do not know why your esteemed parents would not hear of this as well. In short, your productivity of late has been highly unsatisfactory. Admittedly, this is not the best season for drumming up business. We do acknowledge this, but a season in which no business at all is drummed up is something that does not, and indeed may not exist, per Samsa. Ancient debt. Has it been accumulating for like 50 years? Joy and whimsy.
50 years.
Joy and whimsy.
But sir, Gregor cried out, beside himself and forgetting all else in his agitation, I shall open the door at once, this very instant. A slight indisposition, a fit of dizziness, kept me from getting up. Interestingly enough, this is translated as Schwindelanfall in German, which Schwindel also means swindle or fraud.
Ooh.
Fraudger.
The fraudulent one.
Even now I'm still in bed, but already I am feeling very much refreshed. Here I'm getting up, just a moment's patience. It's a bit more difficult than I thought, but I'm already feeling quite fine. How odd, the way such a thing can suddenly come over one.
Fraud, like...
the way... Oh my god.
You know who else
There's
is
a
fraud?
translator's note right here. Virgilius?
Yeah, fraud.
Jaffrod! And Gubo. Don't forget Gubo. Gubo was a fraud.
I hate Gubo so much. Anyways.
I hate Gubo! But there's a translator's note right here. Literally, how can that come over a person? That sentence could also be understood as, this can only happen to a human being!
That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you,
Yesterday evening. Thank you, Susan Bernofsky. Everyone say thank you, Susan Bernofsky.
Thank you, Susan Bernofsky.
This bug is people. So true.
This bug is people.
Yesterday evening, I felt perfectly all right. My parents can attest to this, or rather, I did in fact feel a mild foreboding yesterday evening already. Surely it was noticeable to anyone looking at me. Why didn't I send word to the office? But we always just assume we'll be able to overcome these illnesses without staying home. Sir, do be gentle with my parents. The allegations you make are unfounded, and no one has ever mentioned anything of the sort to me. Perhaps you haven't yet looked over the most recent commissions I sent in. In any case, I'll be back on the road in time for the 8 o'clock train. These additional hours of rest have fortified me. Please do not allow me to detain you any longer, sir. I shall be at the office myself in no time. Do be so good as to say I'm on my way and give my regards to the boss.
The Gregor allegations.
The Gregor allegations. And while Gregor was hastily blurting out all of this, scarcely knowing what he said, he edged closer to the wardrobe with minimal effort, no doubt thanks to the practice he had already acquired while still in bed, and now he did his best to haul himself upright. Indeed, he really did want to open the door, to show himself and speak with the general manager, who was eager to learn what the others, who were so anxious to see him, would say when they finally laid eyes on him. If they recoiled in horror, Gregor could surrender all responsibility and rest easy. But if they accepted it all calmly, that meant he too had no reason to get himself worked up, and if he hurried, he could still make it to the station by 8. At first he couldn't get a grip on the wardrobe's smooth surface, but finally he gave a great heave and found himself standing upright. He no longer paid any heed to the pain in his lower body, ache as it might. Now he let himself drop against the back of a nearby chair, clinging to its edges with his little legs. And having thus attained control over himself, he fell silent, for now he could listen to the general manager. Did you understand a single word? The manager was asking Gregor's parents. Surely he isn't trying to make fools of us. For heaven's sake, Gregor's mother cried, already weeping. He might be gravely ill, and here we are tormenting him. Greta! Greta! She cried out. Mother! Gregor's sister called from the other side. They were communicating through Gregor's room. You must go for the doctor at once! Gregor is ill! Quick, fetch the doctor! Did you hear him speaking just now?
Surprised the wardrobe didn't, like, fall over. Real.
That was an animal's voice, the general manager said, speaking in noticeably subdued tones compared to the cries of Gregor's mother. Anna! Anna! The father shouted into the kitchen through the vestibule, clapping his hands. Run and fetch a locksmith. Hurry. And already the two girls were racing through the vestibule, their skirts rustling. How Gregor's sister possibly gotten dressed so quickly? And flung open the door. Front door. Ah. There was no sound of the door closing again. No doubt they left it standing open, as one sees with apartments in which a great calamity has occurred. But Gregor was far less troubled now, even though the others were no longer able to understand his words, though they had seemed to him clear enough, clearer than in the past. Perhaps because his ear had grown accustomed to their sound, they were now convinced that things were not right with him and were prepared to offer help. The confidence and conviction with which these first arrangements had been made comforted him. He felt drawn once more into the circle of humankind, and was expecting both the doctor and the locksmith, without properly differentiating between the two, to perform magnificent, astounding feats, so as to have as intelligible a voice as possible for the crucial discussions that lay ahead. He cleared his throat a little, making an effort to do this as discreetly as possible, since even this sound might differ from human throat clearing, which he no longer trusted himself to judge. In the next room, meanwhile, all was quiet. Perhaps his parents sat whispering at the table with the general manager, or perhaps all of them were leaning against the door, listening.
Alright. Gregor slowly pushed himself over to the door using an armchair, then let go and allowed himself to fall against the door, propping himself upright. The pads of his little legs turned out to be slightly sticky, and there he rested briefly from his exertions. Then, he set about turning the key in the lock using his mouth. Unfortunately, it seemed he had no real teeth, so how was he supposed to grasp the key? His jaws turned out to be surprisingly strong, and with their help he actually succeeded in causing the key to move, paying no heed to the fact that he was no doubt injuring himself in the process, for brown fluid ran out of his mouth and down the key, dripping onto the floor. Listen to that, the general manager said in the next room. He's turning the key in the lock. Gregor found these words more encouraging, but all of them could have been cheering him on, including his father and mother. Come on, Gregor, they should have shouted. Just keep at it, just keep working on that lock. And now, imagining all of them following his efforts with great suspense, he bit down on the key uncomprehendingly with all the force he could muster. With each revolution of the key, he danced around the lock, holding himself upright using only his mouth and as needed, either clinging to the key or using the entire weight of his body to press it down. The brighter sound on the lock, finally springing open, positively revived him. Sighing in relief, he said to himself, I guess I didn't need the locksmith after all, as he laid his head upon the handle of the door to press it open. But he remained hidden from view as the door swung towards him, even after it was wide open. To be seen, he had to work his way slowly around one of the wings of the double door, a delicate operation if he wanted to avoid plopping down awkwardly on his back before he even entered the room. He was still occupied with this difficult maneuver, and had no leisure to attend to anything else when he heard the general manager utter aloud, "Oh!" It sounded like wind howling, and now he saw him too. Saw how the general manager, who was standing closest to the door, pressed his hand to his open mouth, slowly retreating, as though he had been driven back by an invisible, steady force. Gregor's mother, who despite the general manager's presence stood, with her hair still undone from the night, wildly bristling. Oh, bristly. First looked over at his father, her hands clasped, then took 2 steps in Gregor's direction before falling down in the midst of all her billowing skirt, face vanishing completely where it sank to her bosom. Gregor's father clenched his fist with a hostile grimace, as if he intended to thrust Gregor back into his room, then glanced uncertainly around the living room. shaded his eyes with his hands and wept until his mighty chest shook. Meow?
Meow.
Gregor made no move to enter
It's
the
so
room.
Gregor coded.
Instead, he leaned from the inside against the wing of the door that was bolted fast, so that only half of his body and the head inclined sideways above it could be seen as he peered up across the other side. Meanwhile, it had grown much lighter out. On the far side of the street, a section of the infinitely long, dark gray building opposite, the hospital, came into view within its regular window punched into the facade. Rain was still falling, but only in large drops that were separately visible and seemed to have been hurled one by one onto the ground. An inordinate number of breakfast dishes crowded the table, for Gregor's father considered breakfast the most important meal of the day and would drag it out for hours reading the newspaper. I mean, it is the most important meal of the day. Straight ahead, on the opposite wall, hung a photograph of Gregor from his time in the military, showing him as a second lieutenant whose carefree smile, as he had rested his hand on his dagger, commanded respect from his bearing and his uniform. Had to
Oh
switch
my
the
god.
page.
He's a veteran.
I mean, yeah? The door to the vestibule was open, and since the front door was open as well, one could see all the way out to the landing and the head of the stairs leading down. Well, Gregor said, quite conscious of the fact that he was the only one who retained his composure. I shall get dressed at once, pack up my samples, and be on my way. As for the rest of you, are you prepared to let me do so? You could see, sir, he said, addressing the general manager. I'm not obstinate nor a shirker. Traveling is burdensome, but without it I could not live. Where are you going now, sir? To the office? Yes. Will you report all these things truthfully? A person can be incapable of working at the moment. This is precisely the right time to recall his earlier accomplishments and consider that he will later, once the hindrance has been overcome, work all the more industriously and with great focus. Man's gonna fall down the stairs. I'm so dreadfully indebted to the boss. Surely you're aware of this. On the other hand, I have my parents and sister to think of. Surely I'm in a bind, but I shall work my way out of it. Don't make things more difficult for me than they already are. Take my side at the office. No one loves us drummers, I know. Everyone thinks the salesmen rake in a king's ransom while enjoying life's pleasures, and there's never any particular cause to reconsider this prejudice. But you, sir, have a far better grasp on the general circumstances than the rest of the staff. Better, even, if I may speak confidently, than the boss himself, who in his role as a businessman can easily err in his opinion that, to an employee's disadvantage. And you no doubt know quite well that a drummer who spends almost the entire year away from the office can easily become the victim of gossip, happenstance, and groundless complaints against which he cannot possibly defend himself, as he usually never even learns of them, or only when he has completed one of his journeys, exhausted, and then back home is forced to observe the dire physical effect that causes causes that he can no longer be identified. Please, sir, do not leave me without saying something to show you agree with me at least to some extent. But the general manager had already turned away as soon as Gregor began to speak, merely glanced back at him over a hunched shoulder, his mouth contorted. And during Gregor's speech, he did not stand still for a moment, but instead continued to retreat, not letting Gregor out of his sight in the direction of the door, but only gradually, as though it was secretly prohibited to exit the room. Although he was in the vestibule, and to judge by the abrupt motion with which he withdrew his foot from the living room for the last time, one might have supposed he just burnt it. Having reached the vestibule, however, he stretched out his right hand, gesturing broadly in the direction of the stairs, as if some all but supernatural salvation awaited him there. Gregor realized he could not possibly allow the general manager to depart in his present frame of mind if his own position at the firm were not to be put in the greatest jeopardy. Parents didn't fully comprehend his situation. Over these long years, they had formed the conviction that Gregor was provided for in the office for life. And besides, they were so preoccupied with their present worries that they were bereft of all foresight. But Gregor had this foresight. The general manager would have to be detained, reasoned with, convicted, and finally won over. After all, Gregor's future and that of his family depended on it. If only his sister were here. She was clever. She had already begun to weep while Gregor was still lying quietly on his back. And surely the general manager, ever the ladies' man, would have let himself be assuaged by her. He would have closed the front door of the apartment and talked him out of his fear in the vestibule. His sister was not there, so Gregor himself would have to act. and without stopping to consider that he was not yet familiar with his current abilities with respect to locomotion, nor even taking into account the fact that his last speech of his had quite possibly, indeed probably, eluded comprehension. He let go of the door, forced his way through the opening, meant to walk over to where the general manager, already at the landing, was foolishly clutching at the banister with both hands. Right away, groping in vain for something to catch hold of, he fell with a faint shriek upon his many little legs. No sooner than this occurred, he felt, for the first time all morning, a sense of physical well-being. His legs had solid ground beneath them. They obeyed his will perfectly. As he noted to his delight, they even strove to bear him wherever he wished. And already it seemed to him, he would soon be delivered from all his sufferings. But as he lay there on the floor directly in front of his mother, and not far from her, swaying with mobility held in check, suddenly leapt up. Rapt as she had appeared within her own contemplations, leapt high up into the air, her arms thrust wide, fingers spread, crying out. Craziest part is the one time he's late, they send the general manager, yeah. Crying out, "Help me. For God's sake, help!" Her head cocked at an angle to see Gregor better, but then, contradicting this, she senselessly retreated. She had forgotten the table set for breakfast just behind her, sat down hurriedly upon it as soon as she reached it, as if absent-mindedly, and didn't seem to notice that the big, overturned coffee pot beside her was pouring a thick stream of coffee on the rug. Shenanigans.
Mother! Yeah, Mother, Gregor said softly, gazing up at her. For a moment, he had forgotten all about the general manager. On the other hand, he could not restrain himself when he beheld this flowing coffee from snapping his jaws several times. At this, the mother gave another shriek and fled from the table into the arms of Gregor's father as he rushed to her aid. But as Gregor had no time for his parents now, Gregor had no time for his parents now. Why is the coffee thick?
I don't know, I've never had
I think it's
coffee.
just indicating that a lot of coffee is being poured.
Maybe. I hate the smell of coffee.
Coffee is very watery. It's basically just bean water.
I like leaf water, though.
You're not really missing out on much.
I like tea.
I also enjoy leaf water.
Hey!
Yeah, but it behaves exactly like water, just browner, so do with that what you will.
Brown bricks in
Anyway.
Minecraft.
See. But Gregor had no time for his parents now. The general manager was already on the stairs, his chin propped on the banister. He looked back on the scene one last time. Gregor was just preparing to dash after him, to be sure of catching up with him. But the manager must have sensed something, for he leapt down several steps at once and vanished. And the cry of horror he gave as he fled resounded through the stairwell.
This is my
Unfortunately, the manager's flight now appeared.
Brown bricks in Minecraft.
As he fled resounded and the cry of horror he gave as he fled resounded through the stairwell. Unfortunately, the manager's flight now appears to have utterly discombobulate Gregor's
First,
father.
distract the target. Then discombobulate. Sorry.
Who up till then had been relatively composed, for instead of running after the manager himself, or at least not hindering Gregor in his own pursuit, he seized the manager's walking stick in one hand. It had been left lying on an armchair along with his overcoat and hat. With the other, took up a large newspaper from the table and set about driving Gregor back into his room. With a great stamping of... Wait, I lost my... Fuck.
You're fine.
With a great stamping... here it is. With a great stamping of feet, brandishing both newspaper and stick. All Gregor's entreaties were in vain, nor were they even understood, for submissively as he might swivel his head. His father only stamped his feet all the more ferociously. Across the room, his mother had flung open a window despite the chilly weather, and leaning out, she pressed her face into her hands far outside the window frame. Between street and stairwell, a powerful draft arose. The window curtains flew into the air, the newspapers on the table rustled, and a few pages scudded across the floor. Inexorably, Gregor's father drove him backwards, uttering hissing sounds like a wild man. But Gregor had no practice at all in reverse locomotion, and his progress was very slow. If only he'd been permitted to turn around, he'd have been back in his room at once, but he was afraid of provoking his father's fury with this time-consuming maneuver, and at any moment a fatal blow from the stick in his father's hand might come crashing down on his back or head. In the end, though, he had no alternative. Horrified, he realized he was incapable of controlling his direction, and so he began, with constant anxious glances back at his father, to turn around as quickly as he could, which was in fact rather slowly. Perhaps his father discerned his good intentions, for he did not hinder him in this operation, but instead even guided his rotation here and there from a distance, using the tip of his stick. If only his father were not making that unbearable hissing noise. It made Gregor lose his head completely. He had already turned almost all the way around when, still with this hissing in his ear, he became confused and started turning back in the wrong direction. But when finally he succeeded in positioning his head in front of the doorway, it turned out that his body was too wide to fit through the opening. And of course, in his father's current state, it could not possibly have occurred to him to open the door's other wing to create an adequate passage. He was fixed on the notion that Gregor must disappear into his room as quickly as possible. Never would he have tolerated the complicated preparations necessary for Gregor to prop himself up so as to pass through the door in an upright position. Instead, as though there were no obstacle at all, he now drove Gregor before him, raising a great din. What Gregor heard at his back no longer resembled the voice of merely a single father. It was do or die, and Gregor thrust himself, come what would, into the doorway. One side of his body tilted up, rising at an angle as he pressed forward, scraping his one flank raw and leaving ugly stains on the white door. And soon he was wedged tight, unable to move on his own on one side. His little legs dangled trembling in midair, while on the other they were crushed painfully beneath him. Then his father administered a powerful shove from behind, a genuinely liberating thrust that sent him flying, bleeding profusely, into the far reaches of the room. The door was banged shut with a stick, and then at last, all was still. So that was part 1.
Should explode. We should explode his dad, by the way.
I concur.
I would be very nice if there was a giant bug in my... Wait,
yeah,
how
it
many?
costs you nothing to be polite to the giant bug in your house.
Literally. So true. I forgot we had the... I just tapped back into stream to check how long we've been streaming for. And I forgot I had both the spinning
A whole
roach
2 hours
gif,
already.
spinning roach gif, and the Dream of the Black Swan.
Look, Dream of the Black Swan is necessary, you have to understand.
It's perfect. It's ideal. My goodness, they look like Linton.
They do.
They look like Linton. If my kid turned into a giant bug, I'd be in shock.
If my kid turned into a giant bug, I'd be in shock for like a minute, then actually help them.
Yeah. If I were to turn into a giant bug, that'd be cool. No more taxes.
Yeah!
Wait, how many?
Damn, the rest of Metamorphosis is much shorter than I remembered.
We're on...
It ends on page 47. We're on page 17. So only 30 more pages.
My goodness. I might actually go and get some water. What about you?
I've got some right here.
Hey! Okay. Putting y'all on BRB. Go look at the fan art.
Alright.
Whee! Okay, I return. And while y'all were watching, while y'all were looking at fan art, I have done a little metamorphosis of my own and have metamorphized water into a concoction.
Oh.
And an unholy one at that.
How unholy.
How unholy? It's literally just water and poorly crushed up, Sour Patch Kids candy heart.
That's delicious, not gonna lie.
We shall see. Let me take a sip.
Indeed we shall.
That's boring. I think I put too much water. Anyways.
No!
It's tomato sauce and what? You know what? Just for good measure, I'm dropping in another one. Another yellow one. This one says, sus among us.
Hi, Toady.
Welcome to the excellent. Was there a reason for that?
Yes.
Do tell.
I felt like it.
Alright. Let's continue with part 2. Only as dusk was falling did Gregor wake from his heavy, faint-like sleep. He probably wouldn't have slept much longer even without a disturbance, for he felt sufficiently rested and restored. But it seemed to him he had been woken by the fleeting step and the careful shutting of the door to the vestibule. The pallid gleam of the electric.
We have to kill the whale!
We have to kill the whale! Pallid gleam of the electric street lamp touched the ceiling here and there, and the upper edges of the furniture. But down where Gregor lay, all was dark. Slowly, groping awkwardly with his feelers, which he was only now learning to appreciate, he dragged himself towards the door, wanting to see what had happened. His left side felt like one long, unpleasantly contracting scar, and he was forced to limp outright on his 2 rows of legs. One of these diminutive legs, incidentally, had suffered grievous injury in the course of the morning events. It was almost miraculous only one had been injured, and now trailed lifelessly behind him. Not until he reached the door did he realize what in fact had lured him there. It was the smell of something edible. There stood a bowl filled with sweet milk, in which little pieces of white bread were floating. He almost laughed with delight, for his hunger was now even more powerful than in the morning, and right away he dunked his head in the milk almost up to his eyes, but he quickly drew it out again in disappointment. It wasn't just that eating was difficult thanks to his tender left side, and he couldn't eat at all with his entire body becoming gaspingly involved. But beyond that, even though milk has always been his favorite drink, which is no doubt why his sister had brought him some, now it didn't taste good to him at all. Indeed, it was almost with revulsion that he turned away from the bowl and crept back into the center of the room. In the living room, Gregor saw through the crack. Gas had been lit. But while usually at this hour his father liked to read aloud from the afternoon paper to Gregor's mother, and sometimes his sister as well, in a dramatic voice, now there was not a sound to be heard. Well, perhaps this customary reading aloud that his sister had often written him about has recently fallen out of practice. Even in the other rooms, everything was so still, even though the apartment was surely not empty. What a quiet life my family has been leading, Gregor said to himself as he gazed fixedly into the darkness before him. He felt a great pride at having been able to give his parents and his sister a life like this in such a beautiful apartment. But what if all this tranquility, all this prosperity and contentment were now coming to a horrific end? So as not to get lost in such contemplations, Gregor set himself in motion, crawling back and forth across the room. Grievous? Where did I say? Oh yeah, grievous entries. Think.
Grievous.
Yay. Once in the course of this long evening, One of the side doors was opened a tiny crack and then quickly shut again. And once the other one, someone must have felt an urge to enter and then have been overcome by misgivings. Gregor now stationed himself just in front of the living room door, determined to somehow coax the hesitant visitor inside, or at least find out who it was. The door did not open again, and Gregor waited in vain. Before, when all the doors were locked, everyone kept trying to come in. Now that he had opened the one door and the others had apparently been opened during the day, no one came, and the keys were sticking in their locks from the outside. It was late at night by the time the light in the living room went out, and now it was easy to ascertain that Gregor's parents and sister remained awake all this time, for all three of them could clearly be heard departing on tiptoe. Now, it was unlikely anyone would come into Gregor's room before morning, so I had plenty of time to ponder how best to reorder his life. But his high open room, in which he was forced to lie flat on the floor, distressed him. Without his being able to determine the cause, after all, it was his room, which he had been living in for 5 years now. One of the rare exact references in Gregor's life before the Metamorphosis. So cool. And with a half-unconscious motion, and not without a twinge of shame, he scurried beneath the... What is that?
The settee.
Yeah, the settee. Where even though his back was a bit cramped, he could no longer raise his head. He at once felt right at home, his only regret being that his body was too wide across to be accommodated entirely beneath this piece of furniture. Here he had remained the entire night, which he spent by turns dozing, though he was awoken again and again by his hunger, and mulling over his worries and indistinct hopes, which, however, all led to the conclusion that, for the time being, he behaved calmly and, by employing patience and the utmost consideration, assist his family in enduring the inconveniences they inevitably forced him to impose on them. Early the next morning already, so early that it was still night, Gregor had the opportunity to test the strength of all these resolutions he had made. For from the vestibule, his sister, almost completely clothed, opened his door and cast an anxious glance into his room. She didn't immediately spot him, but when she noticed him beneath the settee, well, goodness, he had to be somewhere. It's not as if he might have flown away. The sight so alarmed her that, unable to control herself, she slammed the door from the outside. But as if regretting this conduct, she opened it again at once and came in, walking on tiptoe as though she were entering the room of a gravely ill patient, or even a stranger.
L'étranger.
Gregor, having slid his head to just beneath the edge of the settee, observed her. Would she see that he had left the milk standing, or not because of a lack of hunger, and would she bring him some other food more to his liking? Failed to do so on her own accord, he would sooner starve than call this to her attention, though the fact he felt a nearly monstrous urge to scoot out from beneath the settee, throw himself at his sister, and beg her for something good to eat. Ginger. His sister immediately remarked with surprise that the bowl was still full, with just a little of its milk spilt on the floor around it, and she picked it up right away, not with her bare hands, to be sure, but with a rag, and carried it out of the room. Gregor was exceptionally curious to see what she would bring in instead, mulled over various possibilities, but never would he have been able to predict what his sister, in her kindness, proceeded to do. To gauge his taste, she brought him an entire assortment of foodstuffs, all spread out on an old newspaper. There were old, half-rotten vegetables, bones from the family supper the night before, caked in a congealed white sauce, a few raisins and almonds. Ew, raisins. A piece of cheese Gregor had declared inedible 2 days before, a dry piece of bread, a slice of buttered bread, and a slice of bread with butter and salt. In addition, placed besides this feast a bowl that had apparently been reserved for Gregor once and for all, now filled with water. An added delicacy, since she knew Gregor would not eat in front of her, she quickly withdrew and even turned the key in the lock so Gregor would understand he could make himself at home. Hey, raisins are amazing. This is my stream. I say raisins are gross. This is law. You can like them, but they're gross.
Wheat v candy, know the law.
I'm Tim Misney. I'm Adelaide Misney. This is my destiny. Gregor's little legs whirred as he now went to take his meal. His wounds, incidentally, seemed to have healed entirely in the meantime, for he no longer felt the least impairment. This was astonishing, For more than a month ago, he had cut his finger just a tiny bit with a knife, and this wound had still been painful enough just the day before yesterday, not earlier. Might I be less fastidious than before, he thought, already sucking greedily at the cheese, to which he found himself immediately inexorably drawn, more than any of the other items. Quickly, his eyes shedding tears of gratification, he devoured in swift succession. These, the vegetables, and the sauce. The fresh food, by contrast, did not taste good to him. In fact, he could not even stand the smell of it, and so dragged the things he wished to eat a little to one side. He had long since finished everything, and was just lying indolently where he was when his sister slowly turned the key in the lock as a signal for him to withdraw. At once he gave a start, though he had been on the point of nodding off, and he hurried back under the settee. But it cost him a great deal of willpower to remain there even for a short period of time his sister spent in the room, for the hearty meal he enjoyed had caused his abdomen to swell, and he could scarcely breathe in his confinement. In between little attacks of suffocation, he peered out with slightly bulging eyes at his sister, oblivious, used a broom to sweep up not only the remains of his meal, but also the food he hadn't even touched, as if these items were no longer fit for consumption. Then she hastily dumped everything in a bucket that she covered with a wooden lid before carrying it all out of the room again. She had scarcely turned her back when Gregor hauled himself out from under the settee, stretching and puffing up his body.
This was how Gregor now received his food each day. Once in the morning, when his parents and the maid were still asleep, and the second time after everyone had eaten lunch, for his parents would always nap a little afterward, and his sister would send the maid out on some errand or other. Surely they didn't want Gregor to starve either, but perhaps it would have been too much for them to experience his meals through more than hearsay. Or perhaps his sister wanted to spare them even the modest sorrow. For even the Lord. Or perhaps his sister wanted to spare them even this modest sorrow, for Lord knows they were suffering enough.
One thing I do want to say
Greg-
is that, like, this is something I noticed last time I read, but also I don't know if, other people notice this, but Gregor is an unreliable narrator.
A little bit, yeah. It's like, ooh,
Yeah.
ooh, my bones. Oof.
Oof. Ow. My muscles? My bone.
Okay, Chandlo. We're feeding you cockroaches later.
Woo!
The Baja kind.
Yay!
Gregor never learned on what pretext the doctor and locksmith had been sent away that first morning. For since he himself could not be understood, it occurred to no one, not even his sister, that he could understand the others. So when his sister came to his room, he had to be content merely with hearing the sighs she heaved now and then, and her words of supplication addressed to the saints. Only later, when she had started to grow accustomed to all of this, though of course it was impossible to become fully accustomed to circumstances like these, would Gregor sometimes catch a remark that was meant in a friendly way or could be interpreted as such. "He tucked right in today," she would say when Gregor had found the food she left him particularly tasty. While in the opposite case, which gradually began to occur more and more often, she was in the habit of saying almost mournfully, "This time he didn't touch a thing." But while no news reached Gregor directly, he sometimes was able to overhear this, and that from the rooms to either side of his, or this and that from the rooms to either side of his. And whenever he heard voices, he would immediately run over to the door in question and press his entire body against it. Especially in the early days, there was rarely a conversation that did not somehow, if only indirectly, refer to him. For 2 days, every mealtime was spent deliberating how the family should now comport itself. But even between meals, the same discussion continued, for at least 2 members of the household were present at all times, since apparently no one wanted to remain at home alone, and of course leaving the apartment unattended was out of the question. What's more,
they
the
got
maid
Kevin
had fallen on her
McAllister.
knees.
Sorry. Sorry.
Crazy work. What's more, the maid had fallen on her knees before Gregor's mother that very first day. It's not entirely queer. Queer? Okay.
Yeah, I am. What gave
He
her
was
life?
not in. I don't know, maybe the sloppy makeout sessions you're having with me?
Whoa, who said that? Who told you about that?
I was there.
You were in the house like carpet.
I was the table.
Gay bug. Yeah. Ever heard of a rainbow
Gay
beetle?
bug.
I don't. Rainbow beetle. Is that actually a thing? Why'd I just say that like as if I knew? I know tiger beetles are colorful. Hang on.
They are real.
They are! The rainbow leaf beetle. Rainbow stag beetle.
And of course. Yeah.
Green rainbow
So
stag beetle.
joyous.
You're so joyous.
We really do have gay bugs.
Life is so beautiful. I mean, like, also there's, like,
Anyway.
fruit flies, but those guys are little freaks of nature. There's a reason why they're sometimes gay.
True. What's more, the maid had fallen on her knees before Gregor's mother that very first day. It was not entirely clear what and how much she knew of what had occurred, begging to be released from the family service. And when she took her leave a quarter of an hour later, she tearfully thanked them for dismissing her, as though this were the greatest benefaction she had experienced at their hands. And without anyone asking this of her, she swore a solemn oath never to reveal anything at all to anyone. Now Gregor's sister was forced to do the cooking in concert with his mother. To be sure, not much effort was involved, as no one did much eating. Again and again, Gregor would hear one of them pressing the others to eat, always in vain, and never with any other response than, "Thank you, I've had all I want," or similar words. Perhaps they didn't drink anything either. Often Gregor's sister would ask her father if he wouldn't like a beer, affectionately offering to fetch it herself. And when he did not respond, she would say, wishing to relieve him of all scruples, that she could send the porter's wife for it as well. But then the father would utter a great no, and no one spoke of it
No.
any longer.
Like Wambus.
Already in the course. No.
I can't believe Gregor's dad is Wambus Troubleham from Bugsnap. They even got bugs in both.
The fact that Herman is also loosely based on Herr Kafka. Gregor's father, Herman Kafka, and also not Gregor's father. Sorry, Franz Kafka's father.
Hang on a second.
I can't speak today. What am I hanging on for?
No. You can continue. It's just I have a really dumb idea.
Oh god. Okay. So you've got Herman Kafka and Herr Samsa, right?
Mhm.
So does this mean Herman Limbus Company is Wambus Troubleham?
I'm trying to make a like one of those clickbait YouTube thumbnails for this.
My god.
Look at.
Sorry, my knee is not being kind to me right now.
That's so real.
I was at Golden Corral earlier and it did the stupid thing it does sometimes.
Yeah.
I love having a disability.
Real. You can continue
What are you
reading. I'm
plotting?
just.
Oh, okay. Already in the course of the first day, Gregor's father explained the family's finances and prospects not only to Gregor's mother, but to his sister as well. Now and then, he would get up from the table, and from his small Wertheim safe, which he had salvaged when his business collapsed 5 years before.
Oh, that's
Uh,
probably to do with the debt.
yeah, it says in this footnote here. Here we learn that the Sumses' move to the present apartment coincided with the financial disaster that befell the father's business, his debt to Gregor's boss, and the beginning of Gregor's self-sacrificing work to support the family. Which also means this was around the time that Gregor moved into that tiny little bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
Extract some receipt or memorandum book. One could hear him opening the complicated lock and then bolting it shut again after removing the desired item. These explanations on his father's part included the first bits of heartening news Gregor had heard since his captivity began. He had been under the impression that his father had retained nothing at all of his former firm's holdings, or at least that his father had never said anything to the contrary, and admitted Gregor himself had never asked him about this. Admittedly, Gregor himself had never asked him about this. At the time, his only concern had been to do everything in his power to let the family forget, as quickly as possible, the mercantile catastrophe that had plunged all of them into a state of utter hopelessness. And so he had set to work with particular zeal, and risen almost overnight from petty clerk to salesman, in which capacity, of course, he had quite a different earning potential, and his professional accomplishments in the form of commissions were immediately transformed into cash that could be plunked down on the table at home, before the eyes of his astonished, delighted family. Those had been lovely times, and never since had they been repeated, at least not with such glory. Although Gregor later earned so much money that he was in a position to cover the expenses for the entire family, which he then did. All had grown accustomed to this arrangement, not just the family, but Gregor as well. They gratefully accepted the money, and he was happy to provide it. But the exchange no longer felt particularly warm. Tony
Yes.
says the mind is willing, but the body is not, and the mind is also kind of not. I'll now go to sleep before I shatter into a shape, maybe.
Yes.
Right, good night, Tony.
Rest well.
Let's see, where was I? Yes, okay. But the exchange no longer felt particularly warm. Only Gregor's sister had remained close to him all this time, and it was a secret plan to send her off to study at the conservatory next year. Unlike Gregor, she dearly loved music, and could play the violin quite movingly. Despite the considerable costs this would no doubt entail, money that could surely be brought in by other means. Often during the brief periods of time Gregor spent in town, the conservatory would come up in his conversations with his sister, but only ever as a lovely dream whose realization was unthinkable. And their parents did not like to hear it mentioned even in this innocuous way. But Gregor was thinking the matter over with great determination and intended to make a formal announcement on Christmas Eve. Thoughts like these, utterly futile in his current state, passed through his head as he stood pressed against the door, eavesdropping. Sometimes general exhaustion made it impossible for him to go on listening, and he would carelessly let his head bump against the door, but then he would immediately hold his head still again, for even the faint sound this produced had been heard in the next room, causing everyone to fall silent. "I wonder what he's getting up to now," his father would say after a while, apparently facing the door, and only then would the interrupted conversation resume. Gregor now learned, and learned quite well. His father tended to repeat himself in these explanations, in part because it had been so long since he'd last concerned himself with such matters, in part because Gregor's mother did not always understand everything the first time. What?
It's been so long since last he's seen his son?
Lost to this monster, to the man behind the slaughter.
I don't know if that song is copyrighted, but it should be fine, I hope. Greg Knight, it's day. Hello, welcome to reading stream. I am making a atrocious little image.
What are you cooking?
I'm cooking up something excellent. Trust me on this.
Oof, that's so ominous. I hope you know that.
Grins. What do you think?
The man behind the man behind the...
Oh, the man behind the... But also, do you see it? Oh, why is it a
I do
transparent
not.
image?
Oh, wait. Oh, you just sent it in DMs. Okay.
Yep.
Let me see.
What do you
Honestly,
think?
the fact that it's transparent makes it funny.
Okay. If that's the case, hang on, let me send it to my PC because I just made that on phone.
It's beautiful.
Alright, don't worry, I'll be putting it
this.
up on screen for everyone. Calling this Matt era. That's the name of the file. Alright, upload image. Matt. Okay. Hang on, let me move this around a bit.
Oh, this is so joyous.
This is so joyous. Yep, that's what I wanted to do this whole time. It's so beautiful.
Well, it came out wonderfully. Thank you.
The same question mark, question mark, question mark. I need to send this.
The way it's right over the dancing roach really helps.
It is.
Anyway, where was I? Let's see. Okay, here we go. His father tended to repeat himself in his explanations, in part because it had been so long since he'd last concerned himself with such matters, in part because Gregor's mother did not always understand everything the first time. But despite all their misfortunes, a small nest egg, really only a tiny one, still remained to them from before, and had even grown a little thanks to the untouched interest that had accumulated meanwhile. In addition, the money Gregor had brought home each month, he had only ever kept a few golden for himself, had not yet been entirely used up and had grown into a small capital. Behind his door, Gregor nodded eagerly, delighted at this unexpected prudence and thrift. To be sure, he might have used the surplus to pay off more money, more of his father's debts with his boss, and the day on which he would have been able to divest himself of his post would no longer have been nearly so far off. But as things stood, his father's arrangements were no doubt for the best.
Stroking my chin.
Also stroking your chin.
You're like just over and stroking my chin for me.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Alright. Now this money was by no means sufficient to allow the family to live off the interest or anything of that sort. It might possibly have been enough to sustain the family for a year, 2 at most, but that's all there was. So in fact, it was the kind of sum one really shouldn't touch, one to be set aside in case of emergency. The money to live on would have to be earned. Gregor's father was admittedly in good health. He was old and hadn't worked in a full 5 years, and in any case he was supposed to avoid overtaxing him. Those 5 years, the first holiday in his strenuous and yet unsuccessful life. He had put on a lot of weight and now lumbered as he walked. And was Gregor's old mother now supposed to hold down a job, despite her asthma and the fact that it was already an exertion for her to cross from one end of the apartment to the other, for which reason she spent every second day gasping for breath on the sofa besides the open window? And was his sister to go out working, this child of 17 whose lifestyle no one would begrudge her, dressing nicely, sleeping late, helping out around the house, taking part in a few modest entertainments, and above all, playing the violin. Whenever the family came to speak of the necessity of someone earning money, Gregor would let go of the door and throw himself down upon the cool leather sofa beside it, burning with shame and sorrow. Often he would lie there the entire long night, not sleeping for a moment, just scrabbling for hours against the leather. Or, not shunning the great effort it cost him to push an armchair over to the window, he would climb up the sill and prop in the armchair, lean against the window, apparently lost in some sort of reverie of how liberating he'd always found it to gaze outside. For in truth, he saw even the objects that were quite near at hand less and less clearly as the day progressed. The hospital across the way, whose all too constant sight he had earlier reviled, was now no longer even visible to him. And if he had not known perfectly well that he was a resident of Charlottestrasse, a quiet but perfectly urban street, he might have imagined he was gazing out his window onto a desert in which the gray sky and gray earth were indistinguishably conjoined. His attentive sister only had to see the armchair standing beside the window twice before she started pushing it back to its place there every time she tidied his room. Indeed, she even began leaving the window's inner sash open. If only Gregor had been able to speak to his sister and thank her for all she was compelled to do, he would have found her ministrations easier to bear. As it was, he suffered beneath them. His sister, to be sure, did all she could to obscure the awkwardness of the situation, and the more time passed, the better she succeeded. Of course, but Gregor came to see it all more and more clearly. Even the way she made her entrance jangled his nerves. The moment she came in, without even pausing to shut the door, although she always took such pains to shoot the others away from the sight of Gregor's room, she would race straight away to the window and fling it open with hasty hands as though she were on the point of suffocating. Then remained standing there, however cold it might be, gulping in the air. All this racing and racket was inflicted on Gregor twice a day. He would be trembling beneath the settee, painfully aware that she would no doubt have willingly spared him this disruption if it were possible for her to endure being in the same room as Gregor with the window closed. Once, it must have been a month since Gregor's metamorphosis, so there was no particular call for his sister to be startled by his appearance. She came into his room a little earlier than usual and discovered him, motionless and propped upright, as if for horrific effect, gazing out the window. Gregor would not have found it surprising if she had chosen not to enter, since his position prevented her from opening the window right away. But she didn't just not enter. She started in alarm and shut the door. The stranger might have thought Gregor had been lying in wait, meaning to bite her. Gregor naturally went and hid himself away beneath the settee, but he had to wait there until noon before his sister returned, and she seemed far more agitated than usual. For this he understood that his appearance was still unbearable for her, and would remain so, that she no doubt had to struggle to force herself not to run away at the sight of even the small part of his body that protruded from beneath the settee. In order to spare her even the sight, one day he carried the bedsheet over to the settee on his back. This labor cost him 4 hours, and arranged it in such a way that he was now completely covered, so that his sister would not be able to see him even if she bent down. If she considered the sheet unnecessary, she could have removed it, since it was clear enough that it could not possibly be considered pleasure for Gregor to shut himself off so completely. But she left the sheet where it was, and Gregor, even though, glimpsed a grateful look when, at one point, he carefully lifted the sheet just a little with his head to see how his sister liked the new arrangement. During the first fortnight battle pass, Gregor's parents could not bring themselves to enter his room, and often he heard them expressing their heartfelt appreciation for his sister's labors, whereas earlier they had often been annoyed with her, as she had seemed to them a rather useless girl. But now both of them, father and mother alike, would often be waiting just outside Gregor's door while his sister tidied up his room, and as soon as she emerged, she had to give a full report on what things looked like in the room, what Gregor had eaten, he had behaved this time, and whether perhaps any modest improvement could be. Mother, incidentally, had wanted to visit him relatively soon, but his father and sister held her back, appealing at first to her sense of reason as Gregor listened attentively, wholeheartedly approving. Later, though, she had to be held back by force, when she then cried out, "Let me go to Gregor! He is my unhappy son! Can't you understand that I must go to him?" Then Gregor thought it would perhaps be good for his mother to visit him. Not every day, of course, but perhaps once a week. After all, she had a far better grasp of things than his sister, who, despite her courage, was still a child, and when it came right down to it, had perhaps only taken on this difficult task out of childish frivolity. Gregor's wish to see his mother was soon fulfilled. During the day, Gregor avoided showing himself at the window, if only out of consideration for his parents. There wasn't much crawling he could do in the few square meters of space the floor provided. Lying still was already difficult for him to endure during the night. Eating had soon ceased to give him even the slightest pleasure, so to divert himself, he took up the habit of crawling back and forth across the wall and ceiling. He particularly liked hanging from the ceiling high above the room. It was completely different from lying on the floor. One could breathe more freely there. A gentle swaying motion rocked the body, and in the almost happy absent-mindedness Gregor experienced, it might happen, to his own astonishment, that he would let go and crash to the floor. Now, of course, he had his body far better under control than before, and even as great as a fall as this did him no harm. His sister immediately noticed the new entertainment Gregor had devised for himself. His peregrinations? Question?
That's correct.
Yay!
Yeah, that's like
Left.
wanderings.
Left behind sticky trails here and there, and she got it into her head to make it possible for Gregor to range as widely as possible by removing the furniture that impeded movement, above all the wardrobe and desk. But she wasn't able to do so on her own. She didn't dare ask her father for help. The maid most certainly would not have helped her, for this girl of 16 or so, though she had courageously remained in the household after the departure of the former cook, had at the same time requested the privilege of keeping the kitchen locked at all times, only opening the door upon particular requests. And so the sister had no choice but to summon her mother one day when her father was out. The mother arrived with exclamation of feverish joy, but fell silent at the door to Gregor's room. At first, of course, Gregor's sister checked to confirm that all the room was as it should be. Only then did she allow her mother to enter. With the utmost haste, Gregor had tugged the sheet down lower and in loose folds so that it really did look like as if a bedsheet just happened to be tossed over the settee. He also refrained from peering out beneath the sheet. For the moment, he resigned himself to not seeing his mother, just be glad she had come. "It's all right, come in. You won't see him," Gregor's sister had said, apparently leading her mother by the hand. Gregor now heard the sounds of these two weak women grappling with this, in fact, quite heavy old wardrobe, with his sister laying claim to the bulk of the work, not listening to the admonitions of her mother, who was afraid she would overtax herself. It took a very long time, after perhaps a quarter of an hour's labor. Gregor's mother said they should leave the wardrobe where it was after all. In the first place, it was too heavy, not finished before Gregor's father came home. By leaving the wardrobe in the middle of the room, they would prevent Gregor from moving around at all. And secondly, it wasn't even clear they were doing him a favor by taking away the furniture. To her, it seemed the opposite was true. The sight of the empty wall positively oppressed her heart. And why should Gregor not experience the same sentiment, since after all, he was long accustomed to having this furniture around him? Wouldn't he feel abandoned in an emptied-out room? And is it not as if, his mother concluded in a low voice. In fact, she had been whispering all along, as though she wished to avoid letting Gregor, exact whereabouts she did not know, hear so much as the sound of her voice, for she was convinced he could not understand her words. And is it not as if, by removing the furniture, we would be showing that we are giving up all hope of a cure and are ruthlessly abandoning to his own devices? I think it would be best if we try and keep the room in precisely the same state as it was before, so that when Gregor returns to us, he will find everything unchanged, which will make it that much easier for him to forget all that has happened in the meantime.
Hearing his mother's words, Gregor realized the absence of all direct human address, combined with the monotony of life in his family's midst, must have muddled his understanding over the course of these 2 months, for he could not otherwise explain to himself how he could seriously have wished to have his room emptied out. Did he really want to have this warm room comfortably furnished with family heirlooms, transformed into a cave or den, in which, to be sure, he would be able to crawl about unhindered in every direction, but at the price of simultaneously swiftly and completely forgetting his human past?
I would
He was
like a
already
little
on the
cave.
verge of forgetting. Of course he would. He was already on the verge of forgetting, and only his mother's voice, which he had gone so long now without hearing had shaken him awake. Nothing should be removed, everything must remain. He was unwilling to forego the good influence this furniture had on his condition, and if the furniture got in the way of his practicing this mindless crawling about, this was by no means to his detriment. In fact, it was a great advantage. Unfortunately, his sister was of a different opinion. She had developed the habit, not entirely without cause to be sure, of presenting herself as the holder of particular expertise when discussing Gregor with her parents, and so now too her mother's counsel was reason enough for her to insist on the removal not only of the wardrobe and desk, as she had originally been intending, but of every last bit of the room's furnishings, with the exception of the indispensable settee. Hold on.
Oh my goodness, it's almost been 3
Let's see,
hours.
I know. Let's see, where did I leave off? Let's see, settee.
How about at the 3-hour mark? We
stop?
like, yeah, for the night.
All right. Let's see, where's the settee part? Ah, okay. With the exception of the indispensable settee. Naturally, it was not simply childish defiance and the hard-won self-assurance she had so unexpectedly acquired in recent weeks that dictated this demand. She had in fact observed that Gregor needed a great deal of space to crawl around in. While as far as anyone could see, he made no use whatsoever of the furniture. But perhaps the fanciful imagination of a girl of her age played a role as well, a sensibility always seeking its own gratification, and one which Greta now allowed to persuade her to render Gregor's situation even more horrific than before, so as to be able to do even more for him than she had hitherto. For a room in which Gregor held sole dominion over empty walls was a place where no one other than Greta would ever dare to set foot. And so she held fast to her resolve, despite the protests of her mother, who appeared troubled to the point of indecision even by the room in its present state. She soon fell silent and helped Gregor's sister remove the wardrobe as best she could. Well, the wardrobe was something Gregor could do without if need be, but the desk would certainly have to say. And no sooner had the women left the room with the cabinet groaning as they pressed against its weight, than Gregor poked out his head from beneath the settee to see how he might cautiously and as considerately as possible intervene. But unfortunately, his mother was the first to return, while Greta was still in the next room, clasping the wardrobe in her arms and tipping it back and forth on her own, without, of course, moving it from the spot. But Gregor's mother was unaccustomed to his appearance.
Alright,
Oh, good
sleep
night.
well, Kurt. It is past 2 a.m. here, so yeah.
Oh dear.
Rest well.
Yeah. Should we just stop here?
Maybe. You know what? Yeah.
Because, yeah.
Yeah. We've made good progress.
Damn right.
And also we have so much on the screen. I'm scared we'll get more on the screen if we progress.
Perhaps so.
But yeah, this
Yeah,
was
we
fun.
should definitely mark our place for now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're on page 28 for future reference.
Woo! Alright. Well, fare thee well, everyone. Bye!
Fare thee well.